Canada's political landscape is at a crossroads, and one name keeps dominating the conversation. That's Justin Trudeau. According to CTV News, the Prime Minister is considering resigning immediately. Is it time for a new direction in Canadian leadership? Here to dive into the problems up north is Brian Lilley. He's a political columnist for the Toronto Sun. So, Brian, what the heck is going on in Canada right now?
I wish I knew. It's changing by the hour. I was doing a live radio hit just after 9 a.m. Eastern, setting up the issues of the day with a talk show host that I speak to regularly and talking about the problems that Justin Trudeau's facing with the incoming Trump administration threatening 25% tariffs if we don't fix the border. We're talking about that, and suddenly my text messages start going crazy. His finance minister has resigned, and I'm just getting message after message saying, wow. And so I look and I break the news live on air to the show host. And the finance minister in Canada, it's like the Treasury Secretary, but it's traditionally the second most important person in the government. It is the second most trusted person. She was also serving as the Deputy Prime Minister. And she not only resigned, but issued a scathing takedown of Justin Trudeau on her way out the door. Chrystia Freeland, who some viewers may remember, she was in New York on Reuters. She would go on Morning Joe and MSNBC. She was on Bill Maher on a pretty regular basis back then. She was scathing in her takedown of Justin Trudeau, horrible fiscal policies. And of course, she lost another powerful female cabinet minister just days after he was lecturing you darned Americans on how you're just not feminist enough because you failed to elect Kamala Harris. And, Justin Trudeau's a real feminist and he'll always be a feminist unless a woman, disagrees with him, in which case he throws her under the bus.
Brian, tell us more about the reasons why. I mean, you say scathing letter. She apparently says he's been focused on gimmicks instead of actually preparing or being able to deal with the Trump tariff threat. Does that mean that he's not sufficiently prepared to do battle? I mean, where are her leanings on this, and what does she mean by this?
Well, she said that we need to be able to keep our fiscal powder dry in case there is a tariff trade war. And if that's the case, then, you could see the government having to help out businesses or communities that are hard hit by the tariffs. And that's going to cost a lot of money. So you need to have that fiscal capacity. Trudeau is highly unpopular. He is polling right now. We have a multi-party system. You generally need about 40% of the popular vote to form a majority government. He's polling at 21% right now. He's tied with the socialists, who he's been using to help prop him up for the past 2 years. And the Conservative Party, led by Pierre Poilievre, is at 44%. I mean, he's more than double the closest two competitors. So Trudeau decided, all right, well, I'm going to start giving people tax holidays. So over Christmas, he gets rid of our sales tax, our national sales tax on select items like pudding and chips and children's toys and Xboxes, things like that. And it's a bit of a gimmick. It's not really going to help people for the most part. He also talked about sending $250 checks to everyone who filed taxes having worked in the last tax year. That would have cost billions of dollars to do it and not actually help the economy or people who are struggling, not in any long-term or meaningful way. And so she talked about that. She described that he wanted to keep spending more and more. Today was supposed to be the day that it's called the Fall Economic Statement. It's kind of a mini budget. It's supposed to be a halfway point budget that updates the country on where the economy is, where the government finances are. And she resigned hours before she was supposed to table this and present it to the House of Commons. One of the things that was going to come out in this economic update is that he blew past deficit projections by 50%. It was supposed to be a $40 billion deficit. It's a $62 billion deficit because this guy can't keep spending under control. He spends and spends and spends and then says, well, if you elect anybody else, they're going to take away all the spending. But he's spending us into oblivion and adding to inflation. So she had fought back against some of this. She is no fiscal conservative at all. She is a darn near a Marxist. I've got her book somewhere around here. Actually, here it is. It did very well in the US. It's called Plutocrats. And she praises economists that believe that you should have a marginal tax rate of 70 to 90%. So, she's no fiscal conservative. But even she thought Justin Trudeau was going too far.
Well, I just listened to you talk there, Brian, and you're like, oh, he's getting rid of the taxes on puddings and chips, and he's just screaming, like me, please, yes. come, let me have just some of your love. Okay, so we're talking now high-profile resignations, right? And people are talking about Trudeau and is the government going to be stable? What do you think? Where do you think the government is? Are they going to be on the verge of collapse, or is this going to play itself out for a little while longer?
Well, throughout the day, we kept hearing, the PM is going to speak at this time. Oh, no, now it's going to be this time. So it was 2 o'clock, then it was 2:30, then it was 3, then it's 4 o'clock. Then he's going to have a caucus meeting to talk to all of his MPs who are upset at him. About a third of his caucus has now apparently signed a letter calling for him to resign. But he's not resigning. He's just appointed one of his closest confidants as the new finance minister, a guy named Dominic LeBlanc, a guy who used to babysit him when Trudeau's dad was prime minister, and LeBlanc's dad was a minister in Pierre Trudeau's government. It's a little too clubby up here. It's like when the Bushes and Clintons were ruling everything in your country. We've got the Trudeaus coming back again and again. So he's just appointed a new finance minister. So he's not going anywhere. We're not going to have an election. We desperately need one. This guy is well past his best before date. We're about to, either fix our border, which Donald Trump has said we need to do, or be in a trade war. This guy has no mojo. He has no strength with which to negotiate with Donald Trump. And you guys know Donald Trump. What does he respond to? Strength. He does not respond to weakness. And Justin Trudeau is incredibly weak right now. So you guys are going to be walking all over us. You're going to be walking all over your best friends and neighbors up here in the north. The guys who populate Vegas with all the people losing money in the casinos and fill up Florida and California and Arizona in the wintertime. You're going to be ruining our economy. But we've got a leader that can't do anything about it. There's a way to negotiate with Donald Trump on what he wants and find a win-win solution. We just have the worst possible guy in charge to do that right now. He actually would rather, those comments that he made about how bad it was that Americans didn't elect Kamala Harris. And I was down in the States last week and I kept seeing it come up on Fox News and they kept making fun of him for it. And, those comments were made because he thinks it's better for him to pick a fight with Donald Trump politically to help him, gain popularity in the polls. He thinks that's a better idea than doing what Trump asks on fixing the border, which is good for us as well, by the way. So he'd rather crush Canadian workers and Canadian jobs and the cross-border trade than do the right thing. He'd rather fight with Trump, even if it means that average Canadians and average Americans, by the way, because you'll end up paying for the tariffs, that it hurts us all in terms of what we can buy and our working, our economy, jobs. He's fine with all of that as long as he thinks it can get him a few more points in the popularity polls.
Brian, I'm curious because I haven't seen a lot of the reaction in the Canadian press for these remarks. It just kind of blew by me in the news cycle. But when you're thinking about Trudeau's weakness, how do Trump's comments about the 51st state and Trudeau being the governor of it, I mean, how does that play into this in Canada these days?
Well, it depends. Are you a realist or are you an idiot? And most of our media are filled with idiots. I think you guys have that in your own country.
Yeah, we got that covered.
So, a lot of the idiots are just sitting around getting offended and how dare he. But I look at it and I laugh and I say, Trump's trolling Trudeau. He's totally trolling him. That's all he's doing. He is poking him and poking at him because he can and because he knows that Trudeau is weak. There is no American official. You don't have to be in the Trump administration. Anyone from the Canadian government, from the Trudeau government, goes and tries to meet with a congressman, a senator, a governor. They're all getting the same briefing note. This guy's at 21% in the polls and is going to lose in the next election. Who's going to take time to deal with that guy? He's only got a few months left. He is the ultimate lame duck. And so, of course, Trump knows this. And Trump is trolling him. I'll give you an example. Our Premier of Ontario, governor, he's the equivalent of your governor for a state level, he came out in response to Trump's tariff threats and said, yeah, there's a problem on the border. Let's fix it. But, he said, but if you hit us hard with tariffs, we will hit back hard as well. And he threatened to cut off electricity sales to New York State, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Those are all states that rely on Ontario for electrical power. That would hurt them. Donald Trump didn't respond to Doug Ford in the same way. In fact, he said to a CNBC guy, I hope we can, when he was asked about it, I hope we can get a deal. Why? Because he respects strength. Ford was just recently reelected. He's strong in the polls. He's popular with voters. He has a command of the files. He's not like Trudeau. And so he's willing to say, yeah, I'll work with you on your issue. But don't hit me because I'll hit you back. And I'll hit you back hard as well. Trump respects that. Trudeau can't do that at this point because he has no authority, he has no mandate, and he's on his way out.
It feels like a soap opera some days. But Brian, Lilley, thanks so much for the update. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our friends up north there, Matt, they're dealing with a lot right now.
It's interesting because this is happening all over the world, right? And
Yes.
It's not just America. This is a movement that's very tied into all these countries in the West. And here you see something that I find hilarious, which is that Trudeau and friends all have parents who are also in politics. So it's weird how in our democracy, right, that with the same people who complain about plutocracy are the same people who mommy and daddy were also in power. And these are the only people you could find. Well, it turns out they weren't very good. Hopefully they get rid of them.
I loved it. He's like, yeah, it's the Clintons that you guys had, you had to deal with down there. And that's what we're dealing with up here.